Hello everyone, if you enjoy my channel, please support me with one like, one subscribe, and one share.
The corporate cage. Have you ever woken up on a Monday morning and felt like the walls of your own life were closing in on you? Like the suit you put on was actually a straitjacket. And the office building you walked into every day was just a slightly more comfortable version of a prison? That was me, standing on the 27th floor of a glass tower in downtown San Francisco, watching the city buzz below me, and feeling absolutely dead inside. I remember that morning like it was yesterday. The elevator ride up was silent except for the hum of the machine and the sound of my own heartbeat. I stepped out onto the carpeted floor, past the rows of identical cubicles, past the water cooler where people gathered to fake enthusiasm about their weekends, and sat down at my desk. The same desk I had been sitting at for 4 years. The same computer screen. The same emails. The same endless, soul-crushing cycle of meetings and deadlines and performance reviews. I was a corporate professional. A success story. I had the title, the salary, the benefits, the 401k. Everything I was supposed to want. And I was utterly miserable. My hands would start shaking every Sunday night at 8 p.m. when I realized the weekend was over and I had to go back. My therapist called it anticipatory anxiety. I called it my body trying to tell me something my brain refused to hear. My English had become robotic. I spoke in corporate jargon, circle back, touch base, take it offline. I had forgotten how to have a real conversation. I had forgotten how to laugh without checking to see if my boss was watching. I had forgotten what it felt like to breathe deeply and feel alive. My husband would ask me every night, "How was your day?" And I would say, "Fine." That word had become my armor. It protected me from having to admit that I was slowly dying inside. I was successful, but I was empty. I had everything, but I had nothing. And then, on one ordinary Sunday afternoon, I did something I never did. I got in my car and drove. I didn't have a destination. I just needed to move. I needed to get away from the high-rises, the traffic, the constant noise of a city that never slept. I drove for an hour. 2 hours. I got lost on purpose. And then, at the end of a winding country road, I saw something that made me pull over and stop. A farm. Not a tourist farm. Not a picture-perfect postcard. A real farm with weathered barns, fields of golden wheat, and a wooden fence that looked like it had been standing for 100 years. I sat there in my rental car, staring at this farm, and I felt something I hadn't felt in years. Curiosity. And then, a man walked out of the barn. He saw me sitting there, staring. And he did something that would change my life forever. He waved. The accidental escape. Have you ever been so lost that you didn't even realize you were lost until someone showed you the way? Like you were wandering through a fog so thick you couldn't see your own hands, and suddenly a stranger's voice cut through and said, "You're not supposed to be here, are you?" That was me, sitting in my rental car at the edge of that farm, watching an old man wave at me like he had been expecting me all along. I got out of the car hesitantly, my heels sinking into the soft dirt. I was wearing designer clothes, a silk blouse, tailored pants, shoes that cost more than most people's monthly rent. I looked like I had stepped out of a fashion magazine and into a completely different world. The old man walked toward me, wiping his hands on his worn-out jeans. He had kind eyes, a weathered face that told stories of years in the sun, and a smile that made me feel like I wasn't a stranger at all. "You lost?" he asked. His voice was slow, warm, and completely different from the fast, sharp voices I heard in the boardroom every day. I laughed nervously. "Yeah, I guess I am." And then he said something I still think about every single day. He said, "You don't look lost in the way you're driving. You look lost in the way you're living." I froze. Those words hit me like a punch to the chest. This complete stranger, this farmer in the middle of nowhere, had just seen through me in 3 seconds. He had seen the exhaustion, the emptiness, the pretending. He had seen what my husband, my coworkers, my therapist had all been too close to see. I didn't know what to say. I just stood there, speechless, feeling like the ground had opened up beneath me. He chuckled softly. "Don't worry, I'm not a mind reader. I just know what it looks like when someone's running away from something." I told him I wasn't running away. I was just driving. Getting some fresh air. Taking a break. But even as I said the words, I knew they were a lie. I was running. I had been running for years. Running from the emptiness. Running from the feeling of being trapped. Running from the question I was too afraid to ask myself, is this really what my life is supposed to be? The old man introduced himself as John. He told me he had owned the farm for 40 years. He had raised children here, lost his wife here, and found peace here. And then he asked me a question that would haunt me for weeks. "What's your favorite thing in your life right now?" Not your job. Not your salary. Not your status. The thing that actually makes you happy? I opened my mouth, and nothing came out. I couldn't answer. Because I didn't know. I had been so busy climbing the corporate ladder that I had forgotten what it felt like to just be. John nodded slowly, like he had already expected my silence. And then he said, "Come back tomorrow. Help me milk the cows." No phones, no emails, no meetings. Just work. Real work. I stared at him like he was insane. But somewhere deep inside, something stirred. Something I thought was dead. Curiosity. The next day, I called in sick for the first time in 4 years. And I drove back to that farm. A stranger's question. Have you ever met someone who saw right through you in a matter of seconds? Someone who looked past your carefully constructed armor, your practiced smile, your "I'm fine" attitude, and asked the one question you had been running from your whole life? That was John, the farmer who had just asked me something that made my entire carefully built world come crashing down around me. What's your favorite thing in your life right now? Not your job. Not your salary. Not your status. The thing that actually makes you happy? I had opened my mouth to answer, and nothing came out. I stood there, in my designer clothes, on that dusty farm road, and I realized I had absolutely no idea. I had been so busy checking boxes, career, marriage, home, security, that I had never stopped to ask myself what I actually wanted. I had been surviving, not living. I was a robot, programmed to succeed, and I had forgotten how to feel. John didn't push me. He just nodded, like he had seen this 100 times before, and said, "Come back tomorrow. Help me milk the cows." No phones, no emails, no meetings. Just work. Real work. I laughed. Actually laughed out loud. "You want me to milk cows? I've never even touched a cow in my life. I don't know anything about farms. I'm a corporate professional." John smiled that slow, warm smile and said, "That's exactly why you should come." Something in his voice made me pause. There was no judgment, no pity, no agenda. Just a simple invitation. And for some reason, I couldn't say no. The next morning, I called in sick for the first time in 4 years. I told my boss I had a migraine. A lie. But it was the most honest thing I had done in years. I drove back to the farm, this time wearing jeans I had bought years ago and never worn. And old sneakers that had been sitting in the back of my closet. I looked ridiculous. I felt ridiculous. But I was there. John handed me a pair of rubber boots and led me to the barn. The smell hit me first: hay, animals, earth, something real and alive. Not the sterile, air-conditioned smell of the office. Something that made me feel like I was actually breathing for the first time in years. He showed me how to milk a cow. My hands were shaking. I was terrified of doing something wrong. But John didn't criticize me. He didn't rush me. He just stood there, patient and calm, and said, "You're trying too hard. Just relax. The cow can feel your tension." And then he said something that made me stop. He said, "Your English is fine, you know. You don't have to be perfect. You just have to be present." I froze. How did he know? How did he know I was always worried about my accent, my grammar, my mistakes? He shrugged. "I've met a lot of people like you. You came here to escape something. But you also came here to find something. And I think you already know what it is." The offer no one believed. Have you ever told someone a truth so big that you knew they wouldn't believe you? A truth so far from who they thought you were that you could see the disbelief in their eyes before you even finished speaking? That was me, sitting across from my husband at our kitchen table, about to tell him that I had just been offered a job on a farm. I remember that night so clearly. The kitchen was spotless, as always. Our house in the suburbs was beautiful, with granite countertops and stainless steel appliances and everything we were supposed to have. My husband was eating his dinner, scrolling through his phone, probably looking at emails. He was also a corporate professional. Also trapped. But he didn't know it yet. I took a deep breath and said, "I met someone. A farmer. He offered me a job." My husband looked up from his phone, his fork frozen halfway to his mouth. He stared at me like I had just spoken a foreign language. "A farmer?" "Yes. A farmer. in the middle of nowhere. About 2 hours from here. He wants me to come work with him. Silence. Absolute, painful silence. And then, he laughed. Not a mean laugh. A confused laugh. The kind of laugh you let out when you can't process what you're hearing. You're joking, right? He said. You're making 6 figures. You have a corner office. You're on the fast track to executive level. And you want to milk cows? I felt my heart sink. This was exactly the reaction I had been dreading. Because the person who knew me best in the world couldn't see what I was feeling. He couldn't see that I was dying inside every single day. He couldn't see that the corner office was a cage. He couldn't see that the 6-figure salary was the price I was paying for my soul. I tried to explain. I told him about the emptiness. The exhaustion. The way my hands shook on Sunday nights. The way I had been pretending for years that I was fine when I was anything but. I told him about the farm, the fields, the peace I had felt just driving there. I told him about John and his patient eyes and how he had asked me the one question I couldn't answer. And I told him that for the first time in years, I felt something that wasn't stress or fear or exhaustion. I felt hope. My husband listened. He didn't interrupt. But when I finished, he just shook his head and said, "This is insane. You're going to throw away everything we've built for some fantasy?" I looked at him, really looked at him, and I realized something. He wasn't just worried about me. He was worried about us. He was worried about what people would think. He was worried about the life we had carefully constructed crumbling around us. He was afraid. And I understood that fear. Because I had been living with it for years. But I also knew that if I didn't take this chance, I would never forgive myself. My first sunrise on the farm. Have you ever watched the sunrise and felt like you were seeing it for the first time? Like the colors were brighter, the air was cleaner. And everything that had felt heavy and impossible just moments before suddenly felt light and full of possibility? That was me, standing in a muddy field at 5 a.m., watching the sun peek over the horizon, and feeling something I thought I had lost forever, peace. I had made the decision. I was going to leave my corporate job and work on the farm. My husband had stopped arguing and started worrying. My friends thought I was having a midlife crisis. My parents called me from across the world and asked if I was okay. I told them I was better than okay. I was finally waking up. The first morning on the farm, John woke me up before dawn. He knocked on the door of the tiny cabin he had offered me and said, "Come on, city girl. The sun doesn't wait for anyone." I stumbled out of bed, pulling on my jeans and rubber boots, and followed him into the dark. The farm was quiet. The only sounds were the crickets, the distant mooing of cows, and the soft crunch of our footsteps on the gravel. I had never been awake this early in my life. In the city, this hour was for catching up on sleep after working late. Here, it was for living. John led me to the top of a small hill behind the barn. "Watch," he said. And I watched. The sky began to change. From black to deep blue, to purple, to pink, to orange, to gold. The sun rose slowly, majestically, like it was putting on a show just for me. The fields below were bathed in warm light. The dew on the grass sparkled like diamonds. The cows in the distance began to stir. And I felt tears streaming down my face. Not sad tears. Not overwhelmed tears. Just peaceful tears. I had been chasing success for so long that I had forgotten what it felt like to just be. I had been so focused on climbing the corporate ladder that I had missed the view from the top. And now, standing on a muddy hill in the middle of nowhere, I finally understood what I had been searching for all along. It wasn't money. It wasn't status. It wasn't a corner office. It was this. Peace. Simplicity. The feeling of being present in your own life. John looked at me and smiled. It gets better every day, he said. And then he walked down the hill, leaving me alone with the sunrise. I stayed there for a long time, watching the light spread across the land, feeling the cool morning air on my face. Listening to the world wake up around me. And in that moment, I made a promise to myself. I would never go back to the person I was before. I would learn to live differently. To love differently. To see the world differently. But I had no idea how hard that promise would be to keep. Because the farm was about to teach me lessons I never expected, in ways I never imagined. Hands that learn to love. Have you ever done something so completely outside your comfort zone that your entire body rebelled against it? Your muscles screamed, your brain protested, and every instinct told you to run back to safety? But you stayed anyway because somewhere deep inside, you knew that the discomfort was exactly what you needed? That was me, my first week on the farm, covered in mud and sweat and feeling more alive than I had in years. I thought I knew what hard work was. I had pulled all-nighters at the office. I had worked through weekends. I had sacrificed my health, my sleep, my sanity for my career. But I had never done anything like this. The first day, John handed me a shovel and pointed to a pile of manure. "You'll get used to the smell," he said with a grin. I nearly threw up. My designer hands, the ones that had typed thousands of emails and signed important documents, were now gripping a shovel. Digging into something I didn't even want to think about. My back ached. My hands blistered. My legs burned from walking through the fields. I wanted to quit. I wanted to call my husband and tell him he was right, that this was insane, that I was a fool for leaving everything behind. But I didn't. Because every time I thought about giving up, I remembered that sunrise. I remembered the peace I had felt. I remembered the question John had asked me, "What's your favorite thing in your life right now?" And I remembered that my answer was nothing. I had nothing I truly loved. And that was the most devastating realization of my life. So I stayed. I learned to milk the cows. I learned to collect eggs from the chickens. I learned to plant seeds and pull weeds and fix fences. My hands, once soft and manicured, became rough and calloused. My nails were permanently dirty. My skin was constantly sunburned. And I had never been happier. Because for the first time in my life, I was doing work that mattered. Real work. Work that had results I could see and touch and smell. Work that didn't require a meeting to approve or an email to confirm. Work that was honest and simple and beautiful. John taught me something else too. He taught me about patience. Plants don't grow overnight, he said. Neither do people. You can't rush either one. I thought about my English. I had been so frustrated with my mistakes, so desperate to sound perfect, so impatient with my own progress. And John, this old farmer who had never left his land, was teaching me that learning a language was like growing a crop. It took time. It took care. It took trust. One day, as I was planting tomatoes, John came up beside me and said, "You know, your English is fine. I don't care about your accent. I care about what you have to say." I looked at him, tears filling my eyes. "But I make so many mistakes," I said. He laughed. "So do I. And I was born here." In that moment, something shifted. I stopped trying to be perfect and started trying to be present. And my English, like the plants in the field, began to grow. Slowing down changed everything. Have you ever noticed how the world looks different when you stop rushing? How the colors seem brighter, the sounds seem clearer, and the weight you've been carrying on your shoulders suddenly feels lighter. That was the gift the farm gave me, the gift of slowing down. And it changed everything about my life, my marriage, and even my English. I had spent years racing. Racing to meet deadlines, racing to climb the ladder, racing to prove myself. I had been so focused on speed that I had forgotten how to simply exist. But the farm had a different rhythm. It didn't care about my deadlines or my ambitions. The sun rose and set on its own schedule. The animals needed to be fed at the same time every day. The plants grew at their own pace, regardless of how much I wanted them to hurry up. At first, it drove me crazy. I wanted to optimize everything. I wanted to find faster ways to milk the cows, more efficient ways to plant the seeds, better systems to get things done. John just laughed. "You can't rush nature," he said. "And you can't rush yourself either." I didn't understand what he meant at first. But slowly, so slowly I didn't even notice it happening, I began to change. I stopped checking my phone every 5 minutes. I stopped thinking about emails and meetings and performance reviews. I stopped worrying about how I sounded when I spoke English. I just existed. And it was the most liberating feeling in the world. My body started to heal. The tension in my shoulders, which I had carried for so long I thought it was permanent, began to dissolve. My headaches disappeared. I started sleeping through the night, something I hadn't done in years. My mind became clearer. I could think without the constant background noise of stress and anxiety. And my English? Something strange and wonderful happened. I stopped obsessing over my mistakes. I stopped second-guessing every word. I just spoke. And the more I spoke, the easier it became. The words flowed more naturally. I started using phrases I had never used before, because I wasn't afraid of being wrong. I was just present. John noticed the change. "You sound different," he said one day. "More like yourself." I smiled. "I feel different," I said. "I feel like myself." And then John said something that made me stop in my tracks. "Your husband's coming this weekend, isn't he?" I nodded. My husband was visiting the farm for the first time. I had been dreading it. I didn't know how he would react to this new life, this new me. I didn't know if he would understand. I didn't know if he would still love the person I had become. And as the weekend approached, I felt the old anxiety creeping back in. I started obsessing over my English again, worrying about what he would think, how he would judge me. And then I realized something. This was the test. The real test. Would I let the old fear take over? Or would I trust the new peace I had found? Losing the suit, finding myself. Have you ever done something so final, so irreversible, that you felt both terrified and completely free at the same time? Something that burned the bridge to your old life so completely that there was no going back, and you realized that was exactly what you needed? That was me, standing in the middle of the farm, holding my expensive corporate suit, ready to let it go forever. It was a Saturday afternoon, 3 months into my new life on the farm. My husband was coming to visit for the first time, and I wanted to show him who I had become. Not the polished corporate professional he had married. The real me. The woman who woke up at dawn and watched the sunrise. The woman whose hands were calloused from honest work. The woman who could milk a cow and plant tomatoes and fix a fence. The woman who was finally happy. But before he arrived, I had one thing left to do. I had been keeping my old life in a box. Literally. A box in the corner of my tiny cabin, filled with the remnants of who I used to be. Heels. Silk blouses. Tailored pants. And the suit. The gray, expensive, perfectly tailored suit I had worn to my most important meetings, the suit I had worn on the day I got promoted. The suit that had come to symbolize everything I thought I wanted. I took that suit out of the box and held it up. It felt like a costume. A costume I had worn for years, pretending to be someone I wasn't. I walked out to the fields, the suit in my hands, and I looked out at the land that had saved me. The golden wheat swaying in the breeze. The cows grazing peacefully. The sky so wide and blue it seemed to go on forever. I looked at the suit, this symbol of my old life, and I felt a wave of emotion wash over me. Gratitude. Because that suit had gotten me here. It had provided for my family. It had given me security. But it had also kept me trapped. And now it was time to let it go. I didn't burn it. I didn't throw it away. I hung it on the fence, right where John could see it, and I stood back. "Goodbye," I whispered. "Thank you for everything. But I don't need you anymore." I walked back to the cabin, feeling lighter than I had ever felt. And when I looked in the mirror, I saw someone I hadn't seen in years. Me. The real me. With dirt under my nails and a smile on my face. When my husband arrived that evening, I was waiting for him on the porch. I was wearing jeans and a simple t-shirt. My hair was a mess. My face was suntanned. I looked nothing like the woman he had married. He got out of the car and looked at me for a long moment. I braced myself for the judgment, the confusion, the disappointment. But instead, he walked over, took my hands, and said, "You look free." I nodded, tears streaming down my face. "I am." And then he said something that made my heart stop. "I want to be free too." A marriage renewed. Have you ever watched someone you love transform right before your eyes? Not because they changed who they were, but because they finally stopped hiding who they had always been? That's what I saw when my husband stepped out of his car and told me he wanted to be free too. And in that moment, our marriage began to heal in ways I never thought possible. He stood there in his perfectly pressed shirt and expensive shoes, looking so out of place against the rustic backdrop of the farm. But there was something different in his eyes. Something vulnerable. Something scared. Something hopeful. "I've been thinking about what you said," he began, his voice shaky. "About the cage. About the emptiness. About feeling like you're dying inside while pretending to be fine." I nodded, not trusting myself to speak. "I thought you were crazy," he continued. "I thought you were throwing everything away." But then I started paying attention. To myself. To my own life. To the way I felt every Sunday night. He took a deep breath. "And I realized you weren't wrong. I was trapped too. I just didn't have the courage to admit it." I walked over to him and took his hands. "So what do we do now?" I asked. He looked around at the farm, at the fields, at the cows, at the sky. "I don't know," he said. "But I want to try. I want to try living differently. I want to try slowing down. I want to try being happy." That weekend, we spent hours walking through the fields, talking in ways we hadn't talked in years. John was kind enough to give us space, but he was also generous with his wisdom. He taught my husband how to milk a cow, how to collect eggs, how to fix a fence. And with every task, I watched the tension in my husband's shoulders start to ease. He stopped checking his phone every 5 minutes. He stopped talking about work. He started laughing. Really laughing. The kind of laugh that comes from deep in your belly and makes your eyes water. On the last night of his visit, we sat on the porch, looking up at the stars. They were brighter here than anywhere I had ever seen. No city lights to dim their glow. "I love you," I said. "And I'm sorry. I'm sorry I didn't see how unhappy you were too. I was so focused on my own pain that I missed yours." My husband pulled me close and kissed my forehead. "We were both trapped," he said. "But we don't have to be anymore." And in that moment, I realized something profound. Our marriage hadn't been the problem. Our life had been the problem. The corporate life, the endless chasing, the constant pressure. We had been surviving together, but we hadn't been living. And now, finally, we had a chance to start over. My husband decided to make a change. A big one. He talked to his boss about reducing his hours. He started working remotely from the farm 2 weeks out of every month. He began to discover the same peace I had found. And slowly, so slowly, our marriage transformed from a partnership of survival to a partnership of joy. But the biggest surprise was yet to come. And it involved a decision that would change everything for us, for our children, and for our future. Simplicity is true happiness. What if the life you've been chasing isn't the life you actually want? What if everything you've been told about success, about happiness, about what it means to be enough, is completely wrong? And what if finding the truth requires you to let go of everything you thought you knew and start over from scratch? That was the question that echoed in my heart as I watched my husband embrace his new life. And I realized that our transformation was only the beginning. A year had passed since that first sunrise on the farm. A year of dirt under my nails, calloused hands, and honest work. A year of watching my husband slowly shed his corporate skin and discover the peace I had found. A year of our children visiting on weekends, running through the fields, collecting eggs, and learning what it meant to be connected to the land. And then, one day, John sat me down on the porch and said something I never expected. "I'm getting old," he said, his voice soft and wistful. "I can't do this forever. And I've been thinking. I want you to have the farm." I stared at him, speechless. "What?" "You've earned it," he said. "You came here lost and broken, and you found yourself. You learned the land. You learned the work. You learned what matters. And I can't think of anyone I'd rather leave it to." I burst into tears. Not sad tears. Overwhelmed, grateful, impossible tears. This farm had saved my life. It had given me peace. It had shown me who I really was. And now, John was offering to let me keep it. I looked out at the fields, the barns, the cows grazing in the distance. I thought about my corporate life, my corner office, my 6-figure salary. And I realized that I had traded all of that for something so much more valuable. Peace. Simplicity. Connection. Real happiness. We bought the farm from John. Not for a lot of money. He insisted on a fair price that was far below market value. But I knew he wasn't selling it for the money. He was passing on a legacy. A legacy of simplicity, of hard work, of finding joy in the small things. My husband quit his corporate job entirely. He moved to the farm full-time. Our children started homeschooling, learning not just from books but from the land itself. And I, the woman who once couldn't answer the question "What makes you happy?" now had a list a mile long. The sunrise. The smell of fresh hay. The feel of soil in my hands. The sound of my children laughing. The sight of my husband finally, truly at peace. Simplicity isn't about having less. It's about making space for what matters. It's about realizing that the things we chase, money, status, approval, are just distractions from the life we're actually meant to live. And sometimes, the bravest thing you can do is walk away from everything you've built and start building something real. So if you're feeling trapped today, if you're feeling empty, if you're feeling like there has to be more to life than this, I want you to know that there is. Peace isn't something you find. It's something you create. And it starts with a single, terrifying, beautiful step.